Welcome to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. The official podcast of the Diablo Valley College Alumni Association. As we celebrate 75 years of DVC's impact on education, careers, and community, we're honored to share the incredible journeys of alumni who've transformed their time on our vibrant campus into meaningful careers, community contributions, and personal success. Each Tuesday, we spotlight DVC alumni, from first-generation graduates to entrepreneurs, educators, and leaders who share the triumphs, challenges, and pivotal moments that shaped their lives. And on Thursdays, it's Resource Thursday. We dive into the programs, departments, and services that make DVC the supportive, dynamic community it is, exploring how they serve students and how you can connect with them. Whether you're a current student, recent graduate, or longtime alum, join us as we honor DVC's legacy and discover how our past continues to inspire the future. Thank you for being part of this journey. Be sure to tune in, subscribe, and celebrate with us. DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. And now, join our host, Alumni Manager, Charlie Daly.
And we are live.
Awesome.
And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us what you do.
Yeah, my name is Matthew Sheridan. I'm with a company called Insperity. We actually focus on HR and compliance. Ultimately, my focus is human capital management and maximizing the efforts of your employee while providing the, richest compensation package, bolstering your status as an employer of choice, and driving discretionary effort, all while offloading and shifting liability and responsibility in the process.
Wow, that's a 2 or 3 breath introduction. So, okay.
Yes, it is.
Well, let's go back a little bit. I know that you've been involved with us for a little bit, but let's go back, and for anybody that listens to this that, doesn't know you, go back and start with what was it? Where did you grow up? What was it like coming through school, and how did you end up at DVC?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I am a transplant. Grew up in Orange County, born in Los Angeles, but only lived there for about 8 months before my parents relocated into the heart of Tustin, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
They were actually one of the first individuals to move in while it was still all orange groves. They were developing all the track homes. Had a great life. Loved it. Very much enjoyed it. My parents were both very successful business people. My dad was actually a telecommunications executive with companies like WillTel, Nextel, Nortel, ultimately ended up at Verizon before moving into banking. But interestingly enough, a little bit of synchronicity, he worked at the Verizon Business Center, which is where I now work. Same building, it's been renamed, but we're essentially in the same office, and I've followed his path, at least in that aspect. My mom, she actually ran the most prestigious plastic surgery firm in the world for 30 years, took it from about 5 or 6 employees, grew it into a multi-location empire, to be very honest. The doctor that she worked with and partnered with had developed all of these cutting-edge technologies that are still used by everyone today.
Plastic surgeon with cutting-edge technology?
With cutting-edge technology, no pun intended. But yeah, really just got to see them as my examples growing up. Saw what it took to really have that good life, and definitely always wanted that. Interestingly enough, my parents split up when I was 13. That started this whole chain of events and chain effect that really kind of launched me into some uncertainty. I moved around between high schools, very admittedly, and I did not complete high school, believe it or not. That was its own problem, and it was something that was just an unforeseen event. I had turned 18 the first week of school. I don't want to say anything bad here, but I did have an incident, and they told me I could not stay at the school anymore. As a result, I went to pursue high school diploma or a GED or equivalent at the local community college in Orange County at Santiago. They ended up asking me, do you intend to go to college, right? Do you see yourself going to a 2-year or a 4-year? Of course I did. And I said, you're kind of wasting your time here. You might as well just test in and go straight into your community college courses. So I ended up doing that. But in the process, I had been offered a job here in Concord. It was with family. It was not the most high-paying job. It was not the most glamorous job, but it wasn't banking, which was something I wanted to pursue. So I moved up here, started working full-time very early on, and I was living in Marin at the time in San Anselmo with my dad and his girlfriend, and I would commute out here to Concord to the corporate office every day.
That's a hoof.
That was a hoof. After work, I'd go to the 24-hour fitness over here at Sun Valley Mall, and I started taking night classes. So every moment of my day was taken up. I did not allow myself any free time, didn't allow myself any time for distractions. But, very realistically, time passes very quickly. I was, I think, 20 years old at the time. Started to get the itch to go out and be social and, make some friends and things like that. And I actually kind of pushed DVC to the side. I got to the point where I was taking maybe 1 or 2 courses a semester, knowing that I wanted to transfer in and potentially go to an Ivy League school or something like that. If I started to have bad marks in the class or I wasn't really excelling, I would drop the classes, admittedly, because I didn't want it to be a mark on my record. Then I found out later, if you did that, too many times, it actually had a negative impact. And I just said, hey, I am tired of wasting time not completing my classes, and I just kicked it into high gear. I also found out there was a deadline that you had to complete by, or you had to repeat certain classes. In that, I bought a home when I was 20, believe it or not, through the bank. It was 2012. Market was at the absolute bottom.
Yeah, I was going to say that the timing on that couldn't have been better.
Unreal.
Yeah.
With that, I took an FHA loan because I worked at the bank. I put 3.5% down. And really, the price only stayed in that range for about 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. The house I had looked at had just fallen out of contract. Interestingly enough, they said there was too many repairs that were needed. I came in, I had already looked at probably 5 or 10 houses at the time. One of the owners of the bank, his wife was actually the agent. And she says, Matt, you need to come see this immediately. It's 5 minutes from the office. Come take a look. Drove over there, saw the house. And I said, I don't care what work is needed. I'm buying this house. I was in contract before I walked out of there. I had the house 21 days later. Jeez. I couldn't believe it. Very honestly, my parents told me you need to do this. Be the stupidest move for you not to do it. And historically, I never listened to them. I thought I was far more intelligent than them. And
I think when we're all 20, we think we're the smartest people in the room. So,
oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I just had this nagging feeling deep down there that I was like, this is a smart move and I need to do this. I did know it was going to tie me to a mortgage for 30 years. And ultimately, I would have to be, a very level-headed, successful individual, or I was throwing my life away. So I bought the house. Before I bought the house, I actually found 3 individuals who were willing to rent rooms for me. So the second I got the keys, I already had tenants. Interestingly enough, the first thing I bought was a 3D TV, a giant 60-inch 3D TV, and I just planted it in the living room with a Bose sound system that was like $3,000. I took out a credit card. Yeah. Immediately got every credit card once I had the house. And I just started advertising it as, hey, like all of the luxury amenities are here. I did not have the luxury amenities at the time, but somehow I sold it. People came in and they stayed. And I took every dollar that they gave me and I put it back into improving the house. So everything that they gave me, and mind you, I kept very low rent. I didn't believe in raising rent on any of my individuals, any of my tenants or my roommates at the time while they were living there. But I did say over the years, as rent increased, if someone moved out willingly, I would bring it to market rate. So I had a couple people stay with me 5, 6, 7 years.
Wow.
Right off the bat. The hard part of that is I was 20, just turned 21, and these individuals were 28, 29, and I was their landlord telling them how to live and setting these rules in place. So that automatically kind of thrust me into a different realm. Unfortunately, it does isolate you from your peers a little bit being on the other side, but it gave me a lot of responsibility and a really strong heading, right? And I looked at it as, if I could do this, what's going to stop me from doing anything else?
Right.
And really always knew I wanted to do finance. But again, working full time, managing a property, being a landlord, doing all these things, there would be times where even I had to drop a class because a home repair came up.
Yeah.
My roof was supposed to have at least 10 years life left. 9 months in owning the house, it was one of the rainiest, wettest seasons that I've ever seen since living here in 14 years. Water was just pouring through my ceiling. Had to drop my classes, had to go get that taken care of. But all of that kind of led up to, again, this crunch period where I said, I need to just knock this out and I need to do this. And I figured I'd rather get my associates, complete something, then go after my bachelor's or a master's down the line when time permits. So I did get an associate in science in accounting. Mm-hmm. I got my advanced accounting certificate and I got my general accounting certificate. Didn't do bookkeeping though, which was very interesting. So I skipped that and kind of went out of order. And the second I graduated, I just started getting job offers. And I will say some of the courses I took here were absolutely amazing. I feel like from an accounting perspective and business perspective, DVC has some of the most amazing education and resources.
Yeah.
And one of the gentlemen who was one of my teachers is actually on like the World Accounting Standards Board.
Oh, geez.
So they were very, very strict. I got very good grades in my accounting classes. It was like history and English and things like that where I got B's and it just wasn't what intrigued me, right? The numbers really did. But in working at the bank for 8 years, full time while doing all of this, high stress, compliance standards, quick turn times, brokers are not the friendliest people on the planet, especially when they have made a timing mistake and they want to scream at you to try and make you, conform and give them the rate that was available 5 seconds ago, but is no longer available. Really just drove something in me to say, I don't want to do this. I really enjoy being out in the world. I like using my hands. I like talking to people. And one of my best friends at the time, still one of my greatest best friends, I should say, one of my best friends at that time in his life, Josh Akiri is his name.
Okay.
He just graduated from USC with a bachelor's in accounting. And he ended up joining a major tax firm. And every night he would complain to me. He's like, these partners come in, at 1 o'clock, they leave at 3 o'clock. Well, we're all here with our heads down. Interestingly enough, he's got a very strong personality like myself. And he decided to tell one of the managing partners that they had poor work ethic. And he felt that a leader should be the first one in and the last one out. And they kicked him out of the firm.
Really?
Yes,
no, that was me and being sarcastic.
They did.
Yeah, I've heard that story a million times, and I've actually played that story out and decided I wasn't going to do it quite like that. But I understand that it's like you have an opinion and you express it.
Oh yes,
and it can sometimes, but for me it was transformative. I mean, in that it was like it taught me how to talk to the boss in such a way that you don't get yourself fired, because that's always important.
That is very important.
Yeah.
And I tried to warn him against it, to be very honest, but it was just something that was eating at him, right? And he ultimately ended up opening his own business, a real estate investing firm. He is the CFO and controller for the company, and he's very successful. Very happy with that decision. But I say all of this because he and I have very similar personalities. And he had a very real and frank conversation with me and was like, Matt, I don't know if you are built to sit under a cubicle and crunch numbers all day. He's like, because I am not. This is what I study. This is what I enjoy. I love finance. I love banking. I do not like crunching numbers in accounting. It's not fun if you're not the boss. So I kind of looked at that and said, well, I'm completing my degree. This is right before I graduated. I was like, we can reassess, a little bit down the line. But I had kind of taken a viewpoint in life where I don't want to stay at the bank anymore. I'd been there 8 years and it was great. And, they moved me into correspondent lending. I was one of 2 employees out of 500 that would release funds between banks.
Oh, wow.
When the loan is actually funded.
Yep.
Which if you, make a wrong click, you are costing the bank $500,000 to $1 million instantaneously. Mm-hmm. I loved it. It was cool. Good experience. But again, I was not fulfilled. I was missing something in life. I felt like I was in this kind of repetitive rut of just, I'm going to work. I'm just doing the minimum requirements to get paid and not lose my job. I've kind of lost my passion. So I ended up taking a job with one of my friends. At the time, I had gotten about 4 or 5 individuals I met at the gym, hired at the bank. So they had very quickly become my close friends group. And 1 or 2 of them had left preemptively because a few of them went off to go be sheriffs. And police officers and things like that. And 2 of them said, we're going to go into the trades because banking is just not what we want to do. And they actually went into garage doors, selling, servicing, and installing garage doors. I followed about a year later because of the amount of money they were making.
Yes.
I also had all of the tools because I was a landlord. I knew how to use them. I'm very mechanically inclined. And it's something that intrigued me. And I was very physically fit. It was a very demanding job, very dangerous. I got thrown off a few ladders. I got cracked in the head once or twice with a winding bar, which can kill you, which is very, very, it's just, I never would have thought how much goes into a garage door and how dangerous it really can be. But immediately I just started making $2,000, $3,000 a week.
Yeah.
Which was far more than I made at the bank. And I was never looking back. I was like, I am in the trades. This is what I'm doing forever. Sure enough, I did that for 7 months. And I came across an individual, Tyler, and I'm drawing a blank on his last name. But he was at a company called Cintas, which is a Fortune 500 multi-billion-dollar company. I went in to sell him a spring repair. And apparently this gentleman was extremely frugal, wouldn't spend money with anyone. He's a salesman himself, so he knows how to pick it all apart. And I was like, look, I'm going to be very honest with you here. This was my pivotal moment. As odd as this sounds, I said, look, if you're going to put this spring in, you're going to spend at least like $350, $400 and get a 1-year warranty on just those parts. If you're willing to spend $1,400, I will get you a whole new door, tracks, springs, hardware, 5-year warranty. Reluctantly, he agrees because the door was kind of beat up. He had just bought the house. But I did the whole install, removal, and everything myself. It was a double wide door, which is not easy. And I talked to him the whole time. And then I saw that he had contractors coming in and out of the house. I ended up making a recommendation. My father-in-law is a builder. Can I introduce you to anyone who might be able to come in and help you and either save some money or give you very good quality work? He stops and goes, I have to ask you something. Have you been trained anywhere to do this? I'm like, no, like this is just who I am. And really it was inherently, deposited in me just watching my parents growing up. But he goes, look, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars training our reps to do what you just did. And you don't even realize what you just did. You made some recommendations and you guided me to a decision and you ultimately had a very happy customer. It's like, will you come interview with us? I was like, absolutely not. I love my job. It's like, there's no way I am going back to that life. You couldn't convince me. I don't care how much you pay me. About 2 weeks go by and something had actually come up with work. And this was a startup. Some very successful individuals from another company branched off and started their own. I'm not going to mention the name, but they had promised me and my buddy who brought me in ownership. We were promised medical and all these other things. And I quit my job at the bank after 8 years, one day without notice, after having a conversation with them saying, I have a very cushy life. These are the things I want. If you can give them to me, then I will come on board. Went and spoke with the bank and said, would you have or harbor any ill will towards me if I left today? And they actually said, we were getting ready to lay some people off and you were not one of them. So if you leave, you'll actually save someone else's job. So I left that day. Fast forward to this incident, something happened, medical scare in my family. And I was really like, where's my medical coverage? They said, we can't afford to give it to you, so we're not going to. And I about lost my mind. And I was like, well, that's a term of my employment. There were witnesses when we had this conversation, whether you wrote it on a contract or whether it was a formalized contract or whether it was written on a napkin or verbalized, that is an implicit express contract. And I learned that here at DVC. So you're going to honor what we agreed to. And they ultimately said no. So in the middle of the job, I told the homeowner, I'm not completing this. My boss will be out here to fix this. And I said, hey, you can come pick everything up from my house in Concord. And I was in San Jose at the time. My bosses lived in San Jose. Said, I have about $5,000 of your money, your tools, your uniforms. You can come pick everything up at my house. I'm done. I quit. I called Cintas, called this individual, Tyler, and said, I'd love to come work for you. Took 3 months to go through the background process. They have the most intense background checks ever. They go through Pinkerton, which is just the...
This is Cintas' uniform people, right?
Correct.
Really?
Correct.
Okay.
Because one, they are governed by international standards because they're an international company.
Yeah.
You're going into all these businesses that do have
government contracts.
Yeah. There's a business here in Concord that I actually had sold to at one point that does the inertia systems for F-16s.
Okay.
So you're getting your TWIC clearance when you go into these businesses. They worked with Chevron. You go into Chevron, you had to get federal clearance to go in there. So I'm working there tomorrow. I had 3 months of no income.
Oh.
I wasn't going to let that affect me. And I'm a very prideful individual. So I went to Craigslist, admittedly, and I just started saying, I will do garage door repairs.
Yeah.
Like, let's make this happen. And it kept me afloat actually until I got hired on. And then I started with Cintas. And I thought I was going in there to be like a truck driver. At that point, I was just mad enough at my previous employer for not honoring the agreement that I was like, I'll take anything. Gentleman by the name of Brian Harger, who was the sales director at the time. I love that man. Interviewed me. I went through 7 rounds of interviews, and he comes back and he goes, there's no way we're putting you on a truck. You need to be in front of the people and you need to be out there as a face for Cintas. He's like, please just come to us. I'm going to make this happen for you. So they kind of threw me into the underdog team to see what would happen. I started in Hayward, San Leandro.
Yep.
And this was during the first Trump election. At the time, it was not the best area to be a 6'3" blonde-haired man in a suit walking around.
Yeah.
It was a little bit harder to connect with local business owners because of the things that were going on. But all of the bigger companies, all of like major corporations, they loved me and they bought everything from me. So I'd go 12 weeks in the quarter without selling anything. And then the 13th week, I'd have these massive accounts that would come through and they'd be like, oh my gosh, like here's an award, and the whole time they're like, you're going to lose your job.
Yeah.
I'm like, just wait. I promise you it's coming. So after that, they ended up moving me to the Oakland location, which wasn't that much farther, but there was more opportunity, more large clients, large entities, corporations, less, mom and pop shops. Did very well there. One day, and I think it's funny, like the events that spark certain quote unquote wins. I was late to a sales meeting that our sales director, Brian Harger, was in town for, and I had no idea. So I walked in about 45 minutes late, super frustrated, because I either left at a time that I got in an hour and a half early or I was late. There was no in between with that drive.
Yeah, I've been through drives like that where it's just either you hit the window right or you don't, and you can leave your house at the same time. So,
yeah. And it could be 1 or 2 minutes that make a difference. I walked in just super frustrated, and he actually made a joke and he's like, drop and give me 50 push-ups. And I was like, I kind of looked at him and was like, Brian, I don't have it in me today. And everyone thought I was going to get in trouble. He pulls me aside and he's like, I know this drive is killing you. He's like, you are so worn out by the time you even get to work that you're only able to put forth so much effort and you're still winning. But I want to make life easy for you. And the funny thing is when I originally applied for Cintas, I applied at the Pittsburgh location and they denied me. I don't know why, but ultimately I went and ended up at the Pittsburgh location. Met with the GM there. His name is Chris Hack, awesome guy. Ended up telling me, hey, we are somewhat skeptical to bring the Oakland and Hayward guys over because it's just a different world and sometimes they don't jive with our clients, but we're going to give you a chance. Sure enough, my commute was now 5 minutes opposite flow of traffic. Everything changed. I was a top performer. I could not have been happier. I have learned I probably shouldn't say this in San Francisco, but I was totally drinking the Kool-Aid. Bought in, like through and through. In a million years, never thought I would have gone anywhere else. Continued to do this for about a year, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
So I get furloughed, and they had just transferred me to Pittsburgh, right? And I'm the newest guy on the team. So we show up, and there's 3 or 4 of us, and they're like, hey, I can't get into my email. What's going on? And this gentleman, I won't say his name, but he's like, I've been through this before. We've all been fired. And I'm like, oh, like this is bad, right? Like I have just left my other job to come here. Like I am SOL.
Yeah.
Mortgage payment. That's all I can think. I have a mortgage payment.
Yeah.
One of the other things, I have perfect credit. I've never missed a payment in my life. Even when I was a kid, I always made sure that there was a payment on there because my parents told me credit is above all, never let your credit be tarnished in any way, shape, or form. So that is my biggest fear. I start getting all these like little panic attacks as they're bringing people back into the room, and I just see them going and they come back in. Here's my card. If you hear of any positions, let me know. I'll do the same for you. Brian brings me in with the GM. And my GM goes, this is very odd because I've never done this with a sales director in the room, but he insisted that he be here. Brian Harger again. Amazing guy. I love him. I actually owe him a golf round if he's going to listen to this at some point in time.
Okay.
But yeah, he goes, look, we know we just brought you over. You're the only one we're not firing. We're going to furlough you, but we will bring you back as soon as possible. And he's like, please, whatever you do, don't take another job somewhere else. And I was like, just to clarify, I have a job to come back to. Answer was yes. Smiled. I went home. Admittedly, it was a very odd time. I had about 3 months to kill. I am actually going to reveal something about myself that's very nerdy. I'm a world-rated video gamer.
Really?
With World of Warcraft.
Okay.
I have played it since its release. I actually have World of Warcraft tattoos. Something I've kept a little bit more secret. However, in all of these groups I'm in, it just keeps coming up. So I'm putting it out there. And I thought, and I'm like, how am I going to keep myself entertained, not spend money, and really minimize any negative impact of a furlough? I was going through that, unemployment and all these other things. And there was an error. Something happened with my social security number. So they didn't pay me for 3 months. So I just had this backlog of money that was accruing. So I started doing garage doors again on the side.
With a mask.
With a mask.
Yes.
In all of this, again, playing video games, made it through. I had tenants, so I had rent coming in. I made sure they were extremely comfortable, that they didn't have to worry about anything. And I provided, paper towel and toilet papers and all those. And just like, please just stay here. Please pay your rent. Luckily, I've never had anyone miss rent in the 12 or 13 years that I've been doing this. So they kept me afloat, to be very honest. Then I get the money right before getting called back. And I actually put it in the stock market. I took the whole 10 grand, put it in the stock market in Tupperware, which was $1.34 at the time.
Okay.
I ended up selling it at like $30 a share and made like $100,000.
Yeah.
So cleared everything out. And then I get called back to work. So like everything is amazing. I was fully entertained for 3 months, didn't move. In fact, some of my tenants would be like, you haven't moved for 4 days, just playing video games.
Go take a shower, bro.
Yes, I did shower.
Okay.
But it kept me entertained. I didn't spend money. I stayed inside and it just flew by. So they called me back. There was a woman I worked with. Her name was Jane Dotsey, one of the most amazing saleswomen I've ever met. She's now the sales manager at Cintas for the Pittsburgh location. And then there was another gentleman, Nick Armstrong, and a woman, Bernadette Carter. Bern was an absolute mentor to me. I really feel like she developed my sales capabilities, along with a woman named Stephanie Redfern, who is now like a global accounts manager for Cintas. But they really sharpened my sword, and they would call me a shotgun. They'd be like, you just shoot, but somehow you hit things. We want you to be this high precision rifle, right? We really want to hone your skills. And they did. And I got some of the best sales training in the world at Cintas. It's like a known fact that most companies recruit heavily from Cintas because of the prospecting skills and the fact that you have to manage everything from lead gen all the way through, like the entirety of the relationship with the client. And then you continue to be involved. But you are doing everything there. That is a grind. That was one of the most challenging jobs I've ever had, one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever had. But again, it is very cutthroat, and you are expected to continue performing every single week, no matter what. Which is a common theme in sales, right?
That's great that you got that big contract. What have you done for me today?
Oh, yes. In fact, I just closed 3 deals last week, and I come in on Monday and my boss goes, what is closing this month?
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me?
Yep.
But it's good, and it keeps you moving in the right direction. So with Cintas, I was there for quite some time. I had a major territory. In fact, another underdog thing, they threw me into Vallejo and Richmond and some other areas, which,
those are actually areas that I don't think get enough credit for. Everybody looks at them, they see what's on the news for them.
Yeah.
The truth is especially Vallejo, like Mare Island, and which is a up and coming, especially biotech, I think.
Oh, yes.
And then Richmond has tons and tons of manufacturing out there.
Biolabs, they've got. So that's the thing is, I looked at it as I want to go places people don't go.
Yep.
And it's funny, I mentioned the election. I actually at one point ended up in a very bad neighborhood in Richmond, and I ended up surrounded by a group of individuals, and a police officer pulled up as it was happening.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think I would have made it out there otherwise. But I think he saw what was going on, and these guys were like, you even know where you are? Do you know what neighborhood you're in?
Yeah.
I was like, I am just here to try and
Sounds
sell.
like you were down in the Iron Triangle. So
yes. And I was just trying to sell soap to this gas station, but all the windows around were boarded up. And
Yep.
even my boss would like, don't ever go there again. But crazy enough, and interestingly enough, I have had massive wins come out of Richmond and Vallejo and Mare Island. Even today at Insperity, one of my biggest clients that we were hoping to sign 2 days ago on my birthday, we are pushing it off till next Tuesday. They're in Mare Island, and no one goes there. People at my company hadn't even really considered it a possibility, but there's so much opportunity there. And it's really, you have to look past the negative connotation of the news, and you just have to be wise enough not to go get yourself into some trouble, to be very honest.
Yeah.
But you do have to be careful. It is Vallejo.
Well, yeah, there are parts of Vallejo that are Vallejo,
Yeah.
and then there's parts of it which I think have got huge opportunities.
Yeah.
And there's some amazing restaurants over there that
Oh,
are
yeah.
little mom and pops. My wife and I go out there once in a while. We love it.
Oh, yeah.
That and Benicia, but Benicia doesn't have nearly the opportunity, I think. But so how did you get from Cintas to Insperity?
Yeah. So I was selling during the pandemic.
Yeah.
We had this chemical DS1, which was already on the EPA end list, so it killed COVID. That kind of spearheaded me into everything. And then we actually had the original and only Germex contract.
Okay.
So everyone else had this like tequila vodka mix that they were washing their hands
I remember
with.
what it smelled like. It was awful.
Yeah. And at some point in time, I just sold so many accounts and contracts or agreements, as we called them. Someone caught wind. I am convinced, this is a conspiracy of mine. I'm convinced that there are people that connect with Cintas leadership and just say, hey, who are your up and comers? Who can we look at? Who can we recruit? Because I found out that Insperity was a client of Cintas. Mm-hmm. I don't know how they found me, but there were a lot of recruiters reaching out saying, we just hear great things about you. The one thing I wanted, and I'm going to hopefully not get backlash for this, is to not have to drive into the city for work. My son was about to be born. I really just wanted to spend time with them. And Cintas actually wanted me to be their sales trainer. They offered me a lot of money to do it. But the biggest piece is I'd be traveling around the country all the time, living in hotels, teaching people, the sales process they had there at the time, which I can't reveal because that's all, proprietary information. Yeah. But I said, hey, I want something closer to home that's going to keep me out of the city just so I can see my family and I can see my son before he goes to sleep at night, right? I don't want to come home and have my son already asleep and I open the door and say, I love you and get nothing back. That is not what I wanted in life. Interestingly enough, I am now in the city 4 nights a week for work, but I love it. And I don't complain. And I think it's kind of opened my eyes, but ultimately, this woman, and I'm drawing a blank on her name right now. I could pull it up. Reached out and just said, hey, we have an opportunity for you. I really think you should consider it. It's close to home. It, involves an aspect of finance, but it's a sales role. But you would be, essentially helping employers give more to their people. And I have had some experiences as an employee that in my mind weren't entirely up to par. A lot of promises, and not to say that I wasn't taken care of, but I am a very, very strong believer of accountability. And if you say you're going to do something, do it. I won a lot of contests at certain companies, and they never gave me my prizes because they're like, well, we have to fill out paperwork and you're going to have to file taxes. It's like, I don't mind any of that, but I won, and I'd really appreciate that little reward, that's what keeps me going. Didn't get those things. So when they told me I had the ability to sell the employee experience, which is really what we sell here, I said, I am in because I've tasted the bad. I want to know the good. And there's actually a whole formula with Insperity. And that's another thing I don't know if I can say on here, but it really is about driving discretionary effort so that your employees go above and beyond, want to show up to work every day, want to put forth that, extra the extra 25%, stay and help their coworkers finish a project, even if they're not getting anything in return. And it is through everything that we do here. Then come to find out, we work heavily with private equity and venture capital. And they're like, Matt, this is exactly where you should be, right? One of the other areas we focus heavily is nonprofits. All of my recent wins have been with nonprofits, and I've saved them a lot of money, which I'm learning is as good as gold, is driving income.
It's better than it's as good as getting another donor.
Exactly.
So yeah.
That is an area I didn't really focus on. It was all very heavily private equity and venture capital and angel family offices, search funds, things like that, leading up to about the last year. But then we're seeing things that like private equity and VC, they're kind of holding on to their dry powder, so to speak, and not all deals are funding. So you've had to kind of shift to other areas, but it gave me an opportunity to get thrown into a world that I was familiar with while knowing multiple industries. Interestingly enough, we're super risk averse, but we fit very well with certain light trades like plumbing, HVAC, solar, electrical, and fire sprinklers.
But see, I could see that, especially because the thing is like I look at those things, trades like that, is those are going to be the future, because the thing is you can't make that in China.
No,
you can't get an air conditioning installed in China.
No,
it's all those things got to get done here. And the thing is those are such tremendously underserved trades here.
Yes, they are.
That there's nothing but upside. And unfortunately, there's not a ton of people coming in the bottom end of the funnel.
No,
as far as workers and stuff. So I could see where I don't look at that as a big risk.
No.
So maybe I'm wrong about that, but I could see that as a huge upside for you guys.
Yeah, and it is, right? And I have a lot of friends in the trades.
Yeah.
Again, I had a brief stint in it. My wife's dad is a builder. So like I know that world. And that for me was my in, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually where I focused when I first came into Insperity, to learn the talk tracks, to learn the product, to learn really the flow of how we do things. Because I also figured, admittedly, this is kind of bad, if I made a mistake, no one there was going to know. If I was going to private equity and venture capital and all of these banks and investment bankers and accounting firms, and I made a mistake, I was going to be crucified for it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just the way it is. If you make a mistake in the eyes of these people, these very successful business owners, you're not credible, you're not verifiable, and they want you out of the picture, right? Until you know what you're doing. So I really learned there. But then I had some very early success with a global private equity firm out of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And somehow I won their leadership over through multiple in-person interactions. One of their investment bankers was like a huge champion for me and got me in the door. They'd been in you mentioned TriNet. They'd been in a 20-year relationship with TriNet, had never questioned their renewals. So their price had just skyrocketed, right? And they had so much money, they didn't really care. But I just kept pushing. It was like, you need to, at the very least, have a conversation with us. We have a very specific relationship that exists with private equity and venture capital with their portfolio companies. So one of the things, we really focus HR and compliance in that we touch payroll. We're not a payroll company though. Other companies are payroll companies that offer technology and compliance. We are the opposite. Payroll is the biggest lever of liability. It results in the most claims. So much can happen if there's a miscalculation or a late payment. So we just say we have to take over that. With the portfolio companies though, we come in at pre-acquisition, so like point of LOI, letter of intent, and we do a full analysis and assessment for free. We're not a diligence company. I have to say that, especially because I'm being recorded. But we do all of the pre and post-op support.
Right.
So with private equity firms, the last thing they want to do is make cultural cultural or organizational changes or disrupt any of the workflow, because people then think companies going to get dismantled, be sold off piece by piece. So we provide extremely clear and accurate insight and reporting to the parent fund so that the business can continue running the way it is. We also protect their investment from day one. So we do all the acknowledgments, policy handbooks, onboarding acknowledgments, lunch, clock in and out, all the data storage. So when they go to IPO or go to sell it or whatever that looks like, nothing comes up that could destroy or derail any sort of buyout or sale or whatever that may look like. So that, my boss was just like, I don't know how, but you have won these people over. And it's very hard to win over these bankers.
Oh, I know. They're very they're very suspicious.
Yes.
I think them and law enforcement are probably the two most suspicious people there are.
Those are all my friends.
I know. Well, no. So like I used to sell into the law enforcement space, and it's like the number one rule is you never fib, even a little bit. Because the thing is like they immediately start off, because they're cops, they immediately start with the idea that, you're not on, everybody that they meet is kind of like a little bit not honest, because that's just that's the world they live in. And so the minute you confirm that, you're toast.
Yep.
So.
Oh yeah. And you really have to work through those biases.
Yes.
And it's not even that, from what I've noticed with my friends, at least, it's not that they want to be that way. They're just programmed that way. Because that's what they experience every day.
That's the world they live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And case in point, not to get off track here, one of my best friends, he comes to my house all the time. He's an officer. And if I get too close to him, he'll do like a side sweep.
Yep.
So his back is not facing me. And he's like, I can't not do this. I have to know what is around me at all times.
Yep.
But back to, private equity and the officers and all that. And just got thrown down this avenue. We do have a private capital markets team. So luckily I was able to get my hands on what we call like the PCM Bible. And it's really the cheat sheet for private equity. Mm-hmm. So I learned the right things to say, went around some very successful individuals here. There's a gentleman, Dimitri Khanum, who's out of our South San Francisco office, and he welcomed me with open arms. There's a angel investing group called the Multiverse or Plug and Play.
Yes.
Down in South San Francisco. So he owns that relationship, set up the sponsorship and partnership with Insperity. But he's like, Matt, you're welcome to come anytime to any of these events. Just learn everything you can and I'll introduce you to anyone and everyone. So that has given me a little bit more credibility. And then I really, honed in on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And this banker who gave me an in, we would just go to all these events, and she took me to this National Grid Partners event at Levi Stadium. Wow. Super high-end event. They had team members out there. They actually had 4 bottles of Hibiki Santori that there were only 16 in the world. And they were like, you can have just things that most people wouldn't get to experience, right? So I started doing all of these events, and I would use LinkedIn, and I would post pictures with her and with the banker, and I would say, hey, I'm out here at another event doing this and that. And it just opened hundreds of doors for me. People started recognizing me, knowing me, being like, oh, we see you at all the events. Come talk to us. Now I've got, these investment bankers. I've got these firms and funds who are letting me look at their opportunities and portfolios. And it's just started this whole spiral and cascading effect. In that, now I'm actually co-chairing the Young Professionals group for ACG, which is the Association of Corporate Growth. My boss was just announced the president of the San Francisco chapter. She did push me into this and spearhead me into the group. And I actually co-chair it with a gentleman named Jacob Strom, who's with Prudential Private Capital. So another avenue and layer of private equity that I am now thrown in and injected in. And these people have welcomed me with open arms. But it's an entire deal maker community. So it's M&A attorneys, auditing firms like BPM and like RSM and Deloitte and all these major names that, very honestly, they're Ivy League individuals with master's degrees. Stepping into those rooms, sometimes I don't always reveal that I have an associate's from DVC, and that's my highest level of education. But when they find out, they're like, you hold your own and you're in these rooms with us. Like that's a feat, which I downplay. I don't try to play myself up or hype any of that. And I really try and stay grounded, but it's very eye-opening, and it was very nice to see that they have accepted me. And I do think so much of what I learned here has carried through and really given me, strong foundation and legs to stand on. But yeah, so I'm in that realm. Just came back from M&A West in Napa, and just everywhere I go, I have these insane conversations. I won't say names, but I had a sit down with a gentleman who was the controller of Robert Mondavi for 5 years. Following that, he was the controller of Constellation Brands for 5 years. Yep. And my honest question to them is, what can I do to help you? And can I refer you opportunities? Because I have so many capital raise requests that come my way because we focus on small and medium business, and I'm constantly in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. So now I've got all these different partners that I just send funding opportunities to. And that's more of a way for me to help individuals I work with, whether we do business or not. My job is actually to be a resource in the community. Even though I'm a salesman, I'm not supposed to sell at Insperity.
Yeah. And see, I look at it more like that's really the heart of a good salesperson, is because the thing is at the end of the day, if you're walking in the door, hey, how you doing? I was, you got a set of Ginsu knives. It's like, hey, buy my knives.
Oh my God.
Nobody cares. And some people aren't going to get this. I said this at something. It was a young bunch of students here, and I talked about Ginsu knives. They had no idea what I was talking about. I'm like, it's a boomer thing. But the thing is I look at any time, it's not about what can I connect you to. If it's what you're going to give me is just not a good opportunity.
Yeah.
So you've come a long way. So talk just for a moment about what you think you got out of DVC. What do you think, let me restate this. What was your favorite class or the favorite thing that you got from it? Because it sounds like DVC took a while because you had a million things going on. It's like life happens.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, talk a little bit about that. Because
Stats was probably one of my favorite. And I really liked governmental and not-for-profit accounting, which was also very challenging. Those were the governmental and not-for-profit accounting was one of my most challenging accounting courses. And it just opened my eyes to the way that like work in progress, like construction allocations work. But stats, there's a funny story there. So I took college algebra 3 times. I have been great at math my whole life. I've never really had a problem with it. But college algebra, for some reason, and it could have been that I had a couple gaps between high school and starting here at DVC, it just threw me for a loop. And I don't know what I was doing, but like the homework, I'd be fine. The test, I was getting C's. So I kept dropping the class. And I actually, in that first one, I met a gentleman who's a very good colleague of mine and friend. His son was actually my first client ever at Insperity.
Wow.
And has been one of my best friends for the last 10 years. He has gone off and started a company that does like augmented reality and cutting edge technology. And that's a whole other story. And I want to get him in here for you. But connections, friendships, and I really have been able to grow and succeed because of the people I've met here. Right. So this gentleman who introduced me to his son, even though I dropped out of that class, we stayed in connection or in contact. And he has opened so many doors because he is an HR director for a major corporation that I will not mention because he'd be upset with me. Very, very large entity that has a huge impact in the Bay. But he's opened doors for me. I go to a lot of nonprofit networking events and see him, and a lot of my clients are there. So it's a lot of like, I guess, cross involvement or overlap. But his son specifically kind of saved me here at Insperity. In my first year, we call it our fall campaign, which is when people go through renewal and open enrollment. 90% of our business is done during this time. It's like a tax season for us, essentially.
Yeah.
I had reached out to him, and he had actually asked me to come be part of this company. I was like, no. Like I owned a clothing company with a buddy of mine who's an attorney in Southern California previously. We did merchandise for artists who actually perform at like EDC and things like that. We were very successful. But I did not want to remain in the world of clothing. I didn't want to be in apparel because it's very hit or miss. And he was essentially starting a company that did stickers. It's like, I'm sorry. Like I'll introduce you to all of my people. I introduced him to a CPA of mine who is still their CPA, and he said was like one of the most integral cogs in his story. Jeff Rondini with Mount Diablo Tax Pros around the corner up in Clayton. Told me all about this, told me how good he was doing. He's like, we're in Burlingame. You got to come by sometime. And I'm like, we'll talk later, dude. I don't really have time for that. I'm super busy. Sure enough, I had sold an account right next door to him, not even knowing that his business was next door. And I walked out and I looked at it, and like, mind you, this is right next to the Facebook campus, right on the water at Burlingame. And I look at this building and it doesn't have a sign. I'm like, that would be a really good prospect. I want to go in there and talk to them. And my buddy who was driving is like, we need to beat traffic. So we leave. I call him, or I texted him like a week later. I'm like, hey, our fall campaign is rounding out. Do you know anyone who might need services? And he's like, we're looking right now. And he's like, remember, I told you I have this company. So he sends me the address, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, I was just in front of your building. It is a much larger organization than I had imagined. He blew my mind with what he put together. I'm so proud of him. But we took a look, and he signed up right away. And when we got to negotiations, my boss was actually blown away because before the financials had even come out, he gave me a dollar figure. He's like, this is what I need to make it work. Took it back to my boss. She's like, we could totally do that. He paid and signed the agreement before we had actually given him the financial disclosures. And my boss goes, that's the first time I've ever seen this. And she's been there for 15 years. Yeah. She's like, that is trust. And he's still a client today, loves us. We have protected his business through 1 or 2 incidents. And that's really where we shine and show our value. Because admittedly, we are, I say this a lot, we're the Rolls Royce of HR and compliance and payroll. We actually founded this co-employment industry, or my CEO did, 38 years ago, went before Congress, had lobbied to have this concept be legally recognized so smaller businesses could aggregate bodies and have access to Fortune 100 benefits without being priced out of, the market by companies like Google and things like that, so they could keep people. And it's just this like mind-blowing thing, right? in that there have been other competitors who've gone to him and said, hey, we'll save you $20,000, $30,000 a year. And he has forwarded me the emails with the response and goes, my relationship with this individual is not worth that amount of money. And then we had one or two incidents where, an employee tried to go after them because we're in very hard economic times. We absolutely shined. We proved there were acknowledgments of everything. They tried to say they didn't get their last check. Our courier took pictures of them handing the check to this individual so they can sleep well at night knowing they don't have to worry about some impact to their bottom line, some lawsuit, something like that. So that one, lifelong friends, a client, someone who launched me into success, really gave me the ability to continue into my second year at Insperity, and has been a huge advocate for me. Beyond that, a few of my friends from accounting classes. One of them is now a controller at a 100-person company in Martinez. I will not say the name, but I'm very aggressively trying to win their business. And everyone I went to school with has been more than willing to open doors for me. I like to believe that when we were all in school together, we studied together, we helped each other any way we could. But there has been a true alumni network for me long before I even joined this association with you.
Well, you really built your own You built your own network. You're like me. You're like, you kind of like collect people, and you're a networker type.
I try.
And that's really what we're looking to do here at DVC with the Alumni Association, is to take that concept and give it everybody a chance to get into it. Because lifting it on your own can be tough. It's a lot of work and stuff like that. And like I think I said before we got started, it's like, I think I've watched what you do on LinkedIn, and I'm going, there's a guy that knows, he's got a very specific idea of what he's going to do, and he's very patient with it, and it's paid off. But it had to be very, very patient and very focused as far as, here's what it looks like. Every time you're on it, you do this and this and this, and it's paid off on that.
It has. And in that, I have to make sure not to overpost, because
Yes.
I definitely can do that. We also have a system that does post for us, so I have to work it in there. But the other piece we talked about earlier is you have to make sure you don't get too personal.
Yep.
There has to be a point to it. You have to have a target audience. You have to use it to create relevance. So I, again, use all that private equity stuff, which is ultimately what got me selected for ACG. And funny enough, the first event we had, I might have gotten in some hot water for this, but I got some BlackRock guys to come and a few other very, very prominent bankers. I took every chance in that first post. I tagged BlackRock. I tagged the bankers. I tagged all these other firms to where there were like 70 people. I actually had a cap on how many people I could tag, but the goal was that they would repost it or their companies would repost it. And we have had so much success with this ACG Young Professionals group. It's been amazing. That's all I can say. And we have another event coming up next week on the 18th at Bernstein Wealth Management. The last one was at Salesforce Tower on the 46th floor. And these individuals just give us the space. That's the other piece. Is the first event, we had to pay a minimum at a bar. I won't say the name. We ended up bringing in like $7,000 or $8,000 for the bar with the 2 hours we were there. So we asked them the second time, will you host us with no minimum? It's very clear we're going to bring you money. We're going to bring revenue in. Can you host us without a minimum? They said no. So we sent some emails out to people who came to the first event and were like, is there any way you can help us? And people said the first event was so successful and so many different bankers had connected, like whatever we can do for you. And all of these locations are just opening up. And it was all off of a LinkedIn post and just creating hype off of a LinkedIn post. And we're not paying for this space, which is even crazier, getting once in a lifetime experiences, once in a lifetime views of the city. And it's, at the very least, bringing people into the room.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I can only thank my boss and others for, considering me and including me. But something else you had mentioned a moment ago, and not to get off topic, I have very bad ADHD here. I'm sorry. With DVC, I, again, grew up in Orange County. Moved up here when I was 20, didn't know anyone. I worked full time. I went to school. I didn't really have a chance to network or build a community until I was at DVC. It was really where I met certain individuals, and as they grew into their career, have now been able to work with them.
So this is really the place where your story starts.
This is the place where my life changed.
Yeah.
100,000%. And I don't, at one point I thought I'm not going to finish this. Like, I don't know why I'm doing this, to be very honest. But something clicked to me. I was like, no, like I didn't start this to quit. And I wanted to go to a 4-year, and I still want to. And I believe in the next couple of years I will. And I also believe Insperity will help pay for it, which is amazing. So I'm also trying to build up a nice little resume and credentials with all of these groups I'm in so that I will get accepted into some very prestigious school. Because I always had dreams of going to Pepperdine.
Yes.
Or Harvard or Cornell. My uncle was a professor at Cornell, and I always wanted to be the first person to go to Harvard. I wanted to be an attorney. That didn't happen, and I'm glad, actually. I think I would have had a moral conflict representing certain people if I knew that they had done bad things. But I somehow, with Insperity, get to do everything. Finance, the compliance, which I love, right? You know, the employee experience, bringing great value to their people, but also there is kind of like this like legal aspect that relates to, you know, law and being an attorney. Not that I get to be an attorney or litigate or anything like that, but I get to follow and be involved in all of these, you know, conflict resolution issues and all of these things. But the biggest piece is that I get to be out there and be social.
Yes.
And that is where I shine. And I never saw that. And I didn't understand why these people wanted to hire me. But I'd have conversations with them. And even, like I said, with Cintas, I thought I went in for an entry position. And they're like, we cannot possibly put you in this position. You have to be here. And that is something that my whole life has shaped, right? Like that's not just one thing. Even when I was a kid, I had the worst ADHD. I was a Ritalin test subject. I'm not kidding. It was at a place called the Drake Institute. They'd probe me and put me in this like Stranger Things, like, you know, science fiction type room that was all white. And I'd have to sit still long enough to let this like clown on a bicycle fly. And if I moved, the balloons would pop and he'd crash in the forest. So I always had a very hard time keeping to myself and not being social. I'd get the, you know, straight A's, but he's a distraction, or he'd finish his work and he'd talk to all these other kids. But now my work is talking to people. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so many different forces in my life tried to stifle that. But here it was encouraged, and it just spurred and spawned this life that I now have. And we are blessed. My wife doesn't have to work. Mm-hmm. I am a sole provider. Insperity has given me the opportunity to do that. And she gets to stay at home and raise our son and have those memories. And I wish I could have those too. And I get glimpses of them, but she at least gets them. And in today's world where everyone has, you know, in childcare and things like that, none of that would be possible without Insperity. So I owe my life to Insperity, and in turn, DVC, because I wouldn't be here without that degree. And DVC carries weight. Like that diploma carries a lot of weight. And, you know, down in Orange County, there's tons of community colleges. There's really good ones, but I don't see people coming out of those community colleges getting the same opportunities that I see people coming out of DVC. And most of the people I went to school with here either went on to very prestigious 4-year schools or started their own businesses. And, you know, the gentleman I told you about with the cutting edge business, him and his 2 business partners, they all make $250,000 plus a year coming out of DVC. Yeah. And they're very successful. Yeah. So anyone who is listening to this and considering not finishing your classes, finish your classes. It's just a matter of perseverance and time.
Yeah, I have I mean, to your point about what DVC means, I think a lot of people go, well, it's only DVC. Well, there's a gentleman I have, I'm going to have an interview with beginning of October, who's actually went on to Berkeley from DVC, went to Berkeley, and then graduated with his MD with a specialist in pediatric hand surgery. And so he's a doctor. I mean, he was just in front of a Senate committee meeting with Bernie Sanders.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, and I tell people that all the time with DVC. It's like, look, this is a wonderful opportunity. You can do anything here. And usually, you know, if you go off and it's big enough, but not so big that you get lost. And I think that's an important thing. Unless
you're looking for the Alumni Foundation office.
Yes, that's true. We're going to work on that. So anything you want to wrap up with?
I just owe so much to DVC. Another group that I am now in, which we've talked about, is Leadership San Francisco.
Yep.
Again, I'm in a room of civic leaders, individuals who are actively campaigning or have put, measures on the ballot, people who are managing partners of the Big Four and like all these law firms. And I don't think I'd be there and in these rooms, or let alone able to hold my own, if I hadn't had this experience. I really believe DVC gave me a place that I could feel that I belong to, and a group that I feel I could belong to. And I have had, again, so many people that I've met here who are still lifelong connections, and I believe will continue to be. And if they're listening, I hope they give me their business, specifically someone in Martinez. But, we're working on it.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for your time, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you for tuning in to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. The official podcast of the Diablo Valley College Alumni Association, celebrating 75 years of DVC's incredible impact on education, careers, and community. We hope today's episode gave you valuable insights into the journeys of our alumni and the powerful resources available at DVC. Don't forget to join us every Tuesday for inspiring alumni stories, and on Resource Thursdays, where we spotlight DVC's departments and services, showing you how they're shaping student success. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and exploring the connections that make DVC's legacy so special. And remember, DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next.